The Best Present. Chapter 1. Gifts. Fluffington St. Bernard was the richest Webkinz in Kinsville, and so at Christmas he had to have the best presents. But Fluffington never really understood Christmas because he only ever bought gifts for himself. "None of these gifts are for your friends?" the cashier at the W shop asked him. Give gifts? The thought had never crossed Fluffington's mind. "Yes," continued the cashier, "then your friends give you gifts. That's how it works." Fluffington's eyes popped open. What a great idea! If he gave gifts, expensive ones, to everyone in Kinsville, he was sure to get the best present back. But the trick would be how to come up with a cheap gift that only looked expensive. "What's that?" asked Fluffington, pointing to a big round thing holding open the door. "It's a Christmas cake. We use them as, doorstops," explained the cashier. "Of course. A cake. I could buy one cake for a whole family. No, wait, better yet, I could make them. Then it would be way cheap." An excited Fluffington ran for the food section of the W shop. Yes, he had the best plan to get the best present in the history of Kinsville. Chapter 2. Fruit Cake. Fluffington stood in his huge kitchen, sleeves rolled up, ready to bake fruit cake for every family in Kinsville. He dumped bags of flour and sugar and quarts of milk into a huge mixing bowl. He added dozens of eggs and stirred. "This is too easy," he said, as clouds of flour puffed around him. Fluffington only needed one more ingredient, cherries. He checked his shopping bags. Empty. He opened the fridge. The only thing inside was a bunch of asparagus. "Well," reasoned Fluffington, "cherries are fruits and asparagus is a vegetable, so they're pretty much the same thing." And so Fluffington added the asparagus and put the cake mixture into his huge oven. When the timer finally dinged, he pulled out the world's biggest, juiciest pan of gunk. A disappointed Fluffington wondered what happened. He looked at the pan of orange gunk. It did not look very tasty, but he did not want to bake fruit cake again. So Fluffington scooped the gunk into all the jars he had lined up. He then looked around, and finding a bag of old used bows, started sticking them to the jars. With a big bow on it, gunk's not such a bad present after all. Chapter 3. Special Delivery. Henrietta Hippo stood at her door, staring at a jar of orange gunk. "Surprise," said Fluffington. "It's a Christmas gift. Nice bow, huh?" "Ah, thank you," was all Henrietta could squeak out. "It's supposed to be a fruit cake, but oh well, it's the thought that counts, right?" said Fluffington, handing Henrietta the gunk and running toward his big car. "I'll be home tomorrow in case you have any gifts to drop off," he added, being as obvious as he could. Fluffington knocked on doors all over Kinsville that day, delivering his presents. Sometimes he didn't even know the Webkinz. Actually, most of the time. "I'm your paper boy," insisted a young pup named Sparky. "Really?" replied a dubious Fluffington. "Gunk! Cool. Can I use this to paint my bike?" said Sparky as he started to close the door. Quickly, Fluffington shoved his foot in the way. "Don't forget to tell your parents I was here," hinted Fluffington. Sometimes giving away presents wasn't easy. "Anyone want a jar of gunk?" shouted Simon Singos to his friends in the Singos choir. They were practicing for a charity concert. "But you have to take it," stammered Fluffington. When Simon finally gave in, Fluffington pumped his fist in the air. Yes! His plan was working. Chapter 4. The First Present. After a long day of delivering gunk, Fluffington arrived home and went right to bed. He dreamed of the mountain of presents he was sure to receive the very next morning. Fluffington was up early to catch the mail truck, but it zoomed past his gate without stopping. "I guess everyone needed a day to shop for me," Fluffington reasoned. "My presents will arrive tomorrow." The next morning, with his nose pressed against the window, Fluffington watched the mail truck pass by again. He started to wonder if he was going to get any gifts when he noticed a package in the snow. "My first present!" Fluffington whooped. He dashed down his driveway and brushed off the snowy box. He brought it inside and placed it gently under his huge Christmas tree. All day, Fluffington stared at the gift. His first present ever. Fluffington knew he should wait until Christmas, but he couldn't stand it. He picked up the gift, shook it, and just as he was about to open it, he noticed the tag. He gasped. The tag did not say "to Fluffington." It wasn't clear what it said because the ink had blurred when it fell into the snowbank. "Oh no," gasped Fluffington, "this present might not be mine after all." Chapter 5. Investigation. With only 2 days before Christmas, Fluffington barged into the Kinsville post office, determined to find out if the present was his. "This was delivered to me this morning, but there's no name on it," he snapped. The kindly old dog behind the counter looked up over his glasses. "And you are?" he asked.
"Fluffington St. Bernard."
Fluffington was getting frustrated at how many Webkinz didn't know who he was. He was the richest Webkinz in Kinsville, that's who he was. "Puddle's Hall," said the dog, sticking out his paw. Fluffington was confused. "I really don't care if you're not house-trained, just find out who this package is from." Puddles scowled and then looked over his clipboard. "Do you live in an apartment or a house?" he asked.
"I live in St. Bernard Manor. It's the biggest mansion in town," shouted Fluffington.
"Nope, nothing was supposed to be delivered there. Maybe the driver made a mistake. I'll take it," said Puddles. Fluffington snatched the big present away.
"No, it's mine!"
Fluffington hadn't meant to shout. It just came out that way. "Maybe someone just left it there," suggested Puddles. That had never occurred to Fluffington. Now he really had to find out where it came from. He turned and dashed out into the street. Chapter 6. Fluffington Goes to Town. Fluffington started knocking on doors, visiting the Webkinz he had given gunk to 2 days before. None of them recognized the package. When he arrived at Henrietta's house, Fluffington thrust the gift at her.
"For me?"
she asked, pleased he had got her something more thoughtful than gunk. "No," Fluffington barked. "Did you send me this?"
"I'm afraid not," said
Henrietta. "Thanks a lot," muttered an annoyed Fluffington as he got back into his car. Fluffington then drove to Sparky's house and knocked loudly on the door. Sparky opened it and beamed at Fluffington.
"More gunk? Awesome!"
Fluffington rolled his eyes. "Did you send me this?" he asked, holding out the gift.
"No, but I'll take it,"
squealed Sparky, reaching for the package.
"No, it's mine,"
Fluffington growled. He hugged his present tightly and ran back to his car. Finally, Fluffington burst into the Singos' choir rehearsal, holding the gift over his head. All the Singos stopped singing. "A donation to our charity," Simon smiled, seeing the lovely package. "No?" Fluffington frowned. "Which one of you sent me this?" The Singos all shrugged. "None of us did," Simon said. Later, when Fluffington arrived home, he was exhausted. He had asked every Webkinz in Kinsville if they had sent the present. No one had. Chapter 7. Unwrapped. Fluffington awoke the next morning. It was the day before Christmas, and he was dog-tired. He had just spent the last 2 days running around Kinsville delivering gunky presents to everyone, and then running back to everyone's house trying to find out who had sent him the big mystery present. As exhausted as he was, Fluffington was excited too. That's because he had decided the big mystery present was his. Probably, maybe. It had to be. So he put the present under his Christmas tree, and then spent the rest of the day running around getting ready for Christmas Day. There was a turkey dinner for one to prepare, eggnog for one to make, and one stocking to hang from the fireplace mantel. But try as he may, Fluffington couldn't take his mind off of his present. It caught his eye every time he passed through his living room. Even though he had promised himself he wouldn't touch the present until Christmas morning, he found himself being pulled towards it. Then he was holding it, and then he was shaking it. and before he knew it, Fluffington was ripping the present open. But instead of it being the biggest present in Kinsville, to Fluffington's shock, there was nothing inside. Chapter 8. Fluffington's Gift. Empty. No present, nothing at all. Fluffington couldn't believe it. He thought he had been so generous to everyone in Kinsville, giving them gunk he made with his own 2 paws, and this empty box is how they chose to repay him? "Christmas is a waste of time," he barked, yanking his stocking from the mantel. "I give, and what do I get in return?" "Nothing," growled Fluffington as he pulled the ornaments off his huge Christmas tree. As he was about to drag the tree outside, his eyes landed on the empty gift box. He kicked it across the room. As it flew through the air, a tiny piece of paper fell out. "There is something in the box," Fluffington yelped hopefully. "Maybe it's directions to my presents." He picked up the paper and read these words. "The best presents at Christmas is the presence of friends." "What's that supposed to mean?" bellowed Fluffington. He marched into his study and looked up the word presents in the dictionary. Suddenly, it all made sense. A warm feeling filled Fluffington's heart. "The best present at Christmas," he whispered, "is being with your friends." Fluffington looked around his empty mansion and knew what he had to do to make this the best Christmas ever. Chapter 9. Christmas Day. Fluffington dashed up to the W shop just as the cashier was locking the door. "Please," he whined, "you have to let me in." Even though it was getting late on Christmas Eve, the cashier let Fluffington in. Fluffington wasted no time, grabbing a shopping cart and running through the aisles, buying food, toys, decorations, anything and everything he could think of. When he was finished there, Fluffington went to the Kinsville copy shop and printed up invitations for everyone in Kinsville to come to his house on Christmas Day. It was getting late when he had finally snuck up to the last house to deliver his last invitation. On Christmas Day, Fluffington bounded out of bed like he was a little pup again. He spent the whole morning wrapping gifts and the whole afternoon cooking up a Christmas feast. This time, he carefully followed a recipe book, and there was no gunk to be found. Finally, everything was done. The feast was laid out, a wreath hung on his door, the gifts were piled high under the tree. Only one thing was missing: his guests. The hours passed, and as the sun began to set, Fluffington came to the sad realization he would spend another Christmas alone. He looked at all the food, but wasn't feeling hungry. Chapter 10. The Best Present. Fluffington was about to put the food in the fridge when he heard a soft knocking sound. Was he imagining it? He held his breath. Very faintly he heard it again. He dashed to the front door and threw it open to see everyone in Kinsville standing on his front lawn. "Merry Christmas, Fluffington!" they cheered. His friends had come after all. "Welcome!" Fluffington shouted, inviting the crowd into his house. As Sparky entered, he handed Fluffington a jar of gunk. "I made it for you," the pup grinned. "It's great for painting bicycles." As the guests ate the delicious dinner, they were amazed that Fluffington managed to cook it himself. When it came time for dessert, Henrietta brought out a beautiful fruit cake. "The secret is not using asparagus," she winked at Fluffington. After dinner, everyone gathered around the fireplace. The Singo's choir sang carols, and Fluffington made a big donation to their charity. "Now can we open presents?" asked Sparky. And so everyone opened the thoughtful presents Fluffington bought for them, and he opened the gifts his guests had brought for him. There was no question Fluffington loved all his presents, but listening to the laughter echoing through his mansion, he knew that this Christmas the best present was the presence of his friends.